The camera was found 3 days after Marcus Chen disappeared. Park rangers discovered it wedged between two rocks near the Brown Mountain overlook in North Carolina. Its memory card somehow still intact despite the October storm that had ravaged the Blue Ridge Mountains. What they found on that card would haunt them forever. The footage begins normally enough. Marcus, a 28-year-old geology student from Duke University, had come to Brown Mountain to investigate reports of unusual electromagnetic readings. His voice, excited and scientific, narrates as he sets up his equipment. October 15th, 11:47 p.m. I'm positioned at the main overlook, about 2 miles north of Morganton. The atmospheric conditions are perfect tonight. Clear skies, low humidity, minimal light pollution. If the Brown Mountain lights are going to appear, it should be now. But Marcus had no idea what he was really looking for. For over a century, people have reported mysterious lights floating above Brown Mountain. Scientists have explained them away as car headlights, train beams, even swamp gas. But Marcus had read the classified reports, the ones the US Geological Survey never published, the ones that spoke of something else entirely. There! His voice suddenly sharp with excitement. Do you see that? 3 lights moving in formation about 200 feet above the ridge. They're pulsing. The camera shakes as Marcus adjusts the focus. 3 orbs of pale yellow light drift silently across the mountain face, moving with an intelligence that defies natural explanation. They pulse in unison, like a heartbeat made of light. This is incredible. The electromagnetic readings are off the charts. It's like they're generating their own field, but that's impossible unless... His voice trails off. Something has changed. The lights have stopped moving. All 3 hover motionless above the mountain, and even through the camera's lens, you can feel them watching, waiting. Oh God, Marcus whispers. They're coming this way. The lights begin to descend, growing brighter as they approach. The camera's audio picks up a sound that shouldn't exist, a low humming that seems to come from inside your skull rather than your ears. Marcus's breathing becomes rapid, panicked. I need to get out of here. Something's wrong. They're not supposed to... The footage cuts to static. When it resumes, the timestamp shows 3:33 a.m. The camera is on the ground, pointing up at the sky. Marcus is nowhere to be seen, but his voice can still be heard, distant and strange. They're beautiful, he says, his words echoing as if spoken from a great depth. They've been searching for so long, searching for us. The lights pulse once more, and the camera dies. Marcus Chen was never found, but his disappearance was not the first. And it would not be the last, because something ancient dwells in Brown Mountain, something that has been waiting in the darkness for over 200 years. And now, it's growing hungry again. But to understand what really happened to Marcus, we must go back to 1922, when a government scientist named George Mansfield came to Brown Mountain to solve a mystery, and discovered something that would haunt him for the rest of his life. Dr. George Rogers Mansfield was not a man given to flights of fancy. A respected geologist with the United States Geological Survey, he approached the Brown Mountain investigation with the methodical precision that had made his career. His official report, published in 1922, concluded that the mysterious lights were nothing more than distant automobile and locomotive headlights, refracted through atmospheric conditions. But his private journal tells a very different story. Day 3, October 1922. The locals insist I'm missing something. Joseph Loven, who runs the hotel, keeps saying the real lights are different from what I've been observing. He speaks of them with a fear that seems genuine, almost primal. I've dismissed such talk as superstition, but tonight, I saw something that challenges my scientific understanding. Mansfield had set up his Alidade telescope near Loven's hotel, the same vantage point where Marcus Chen would disappear nearly a century later. His official notes record careful measurements, precise calculations, rational explanations for every light source he observed. His private journal reveals the truth he dared not publish. The lights appeared at 11:15 p.m., just as Loven predicted. But these were not the distant headlights I had been cataloguing. These lights moved with purpose, intelligence. They seemed to respond to our presence, growing brighter when we spoke, dimming when we fell silent. Through the telescope, I could see they cast no reflection on the mountain's surface, as if they existed in some space between our world and another. Indeed, the official report states that Mansfield spent 2 weeks at Brown Mountain and solved the mystery conclusively. But his journal entries continue for 3 months, growing increasingly erratic and disturbing. Day 47, November 1922. I cannot leave. Every time I pack my equipment, the lights return, more insistent than before. They're trying to communicate something. The electromagnetic readings suggest they're not generating light in any conventional sense. It's as if they're tears in reality itself, windows into somewhere else. Day 52. The Cherokee were right to fear this place. I found references in the local historical society to a great sealing ritual performed here in 1838, just before the Trail of Tears. The shamans spoke of hungry spirits that fed on human essence. I thought it was metaphor. I was wrong. Day 67. They took Henderson last night. He was the hotel clerk, a young man full of life and curiosity. I watched from my window as the lights descended around him. He didn't scream, he didn't run, he simply faded. By morning, there was nothing left but his clothes and a strange, sweet smell in the air. The final entry in Mansfield's journal is dated December 15th, 1922. His handwriting, once precise and scientific, has devolved into desperate scrawls. They're not lights, they're doorways, and something is coming through. I've tried to warn the authorities, but who would believe me? My official report will stand as the truth, but I pray someone someday will find these pages and understand. The Cherokee didn't create a legend to explain the lights. They created a legend to hide what the lights really are. The ceiling is weakening. I can feel it in the electromagnetic disturbances, see it in the way the lights grow bolder each night. They're searching for something, or someone. And I fear they're close to finding it. Mansfield's journal ends there. His official report was published, the mystery declared solved, and the scientist returned to Washington, D.C., where he lived quietly until his death in 1947. He never spoke publicly about Brown Mountain again, but in his personal effects, found after his death, was a single photograph. It shows 3 orbs of light hovering above Brown Mountain, and in their glow, the faint outline of human figures. On the back, in Mansfield's handwriting, a single word, searching. The Cherokee knew what Mansfield discovered too late. The lights of Brown Mountain are not spirits of the dead seeking their loved ones. They are something far older, far hungrier, and they have been waiting patiently for the barriers between worlds to weaken enough for them to cross over completely. But to understand why the Cherokee fought so desperately to contain them, we must journey back even further, to a time when the mountain ran red with blood and ancient magic. The year was 1838. The Cherokee Nation faced its darkest hour as federal troops prepared to force them from their ancestral lands. But in the shadow of Brown Mountain, a different kind of battle was being fought. One that would determine the fate of both the Cherokee people and something far more sinister. Sequoia Black Bear was the last of the mountain shamans, keeper of secrets that stretched back to the time before memory. As his people prepared for the long march west, he gathered the remaining medicine men for a final, desperate ritual. They knew they might never return to these sacred mountains, but they also knew they could not leave without completing their ancient duty. The Nunnehi are stirring, Sequoia told his circle of shamans, using the old word for the hungry spirits that dwelt between worlds. The white man's machines and their electric fires are weakening the barriers our ancestors built. If we do not act now, they will break free and consume everything in their path. The Cherokee had not always lived in fear of Brown Mountain. For generations, it had been a place of power, where the veil between worlds grew thin and spirits could cross over. But something had changed in the winter of 1200 AD, when a great battle was indeed fought near the mountain. Not between Cherokee and Catawba, as the tourist signs claim, but between the Cherokee and something that should never have existed in our world. The Nunahi had come through during a rare celestial alignment, when the mountain's natural electromagnetic properties created a perfect storm of dimensional instability. They were beings of pure hunger, entities that fed on life force itself, leaving behind only empty husks that crumbled to dust at the first touch of sunlight. The Cherokee warriors fought bravely, but conventional weapons were useless against creatures made of living energy. It was only through the combined power of 7 shamans working in perfect harmony that the breach was sealed and the Nunahi trapped between dimensions. For 600 years, we have maintained the sealing, Sequoia explained to his fellow shamans as they prepared for their final ritual. But the white man's lightning roads and fire wagons create disturbances we never anticipated. The barriers weaken with each passing year. The shamans worked through the night, weaving protective spells and reinforcing the ancient bindings. They knew their time was short. The soldiers would come at dawn to begin the forced march. But they also knew that if they failed, the Trail of Tears would be the least of their people's sorrows. As the ritual reached its climax, the mountain itself seemed to respond. The very air shimmered with power as the shamans poured their life force into the ceiling. One by one they collapsed, their essence becoming part of the barrier that held the Nunahi at bay. Sequoia was the last to fall. With his dying breath, he spoke a prophecy that would echo through the generations. When the lights dance without the thunder's song, when the mountain bleeds electric fire, when the hungry ones grow bold enough to hunt in daylight, then shall the ceiling fail, and the Nunahi will feast upon the world. The Cherokee were forced from their lands the next morning, but they left behind more than just their homes. They left behind a warning, disguised as a legend, hoping that future generations would understand the true meaning behind the story of spirits searching for their lost loves. But the white settlers who came after them saw only a quaint Native American tale, perfect for tourist brochures and campfire stories. They never understood that the Cherokee hadn't created a legend to explain the lights. They had created a legend to hide the truth about what the lights really were. By the early 1900s, as electricity spread through the mountains and the first automobiles began traveling the winding roads, the ceiling began to weaken. The Nunahi, trapped for so long between dimensions, started to probe the barriers, testing for weaknesses, and they found them. The lights that people began reporting in 1913 were not the Nunahi themselves, but their influence bleeding through the cracks in reality. Each sighting, each investigation, each attempt to explain them scientifically only made the barriers weaker. The Cherokee had tried to warn them. The legend spoke of spirits searching for their loved ones, but the truth was far more terrifying. The Nunahi weren't searching for the dead, they were searching for the living, and with each passing year, they were getting closer to breaking free. But the Cherokee shamans had been wise. They knew that one day, someone would need to understand the true nature of the threat. Hidden in the mountain itself, in the very geological formations that created the electromagnetic anomalies, they left clues for those who knew how to look. And in the 1960s, a paranormal researcher named Joshua Warren would begin to piece together the scientific truth behind the ancient warning. Joshua Warren thought he was solving a mystery. For 15 years, the paranormal researcher had studied the Brown Mountain lights, applying rigorous scientific methodology to what others dismissed as folklore. His plasma theory seemed to explain everything: the mountain's unique geological composition, the electromagnetic anomalies, the way the lights appeared during specific atmospheric conditions. He had no idea he was documenting the slow failure of an ancient prison. The mountain is essentially a massive electrical capacitor, Warren explained to his research team in 2003. The layers of quartz, magnetite, and iron ore create perfect conditions for electrical storage. When underground water systems interact with these conductive materials during storms, they generate plasma discharges that manifest as the lights people have been seeing for over a century. His laboratory experiments seem to confirm the theory. By recreating the mountain's geological conditions on a small scale, Warren's team successfully generated plasma orbs that behaved remarkably like the reported phenomena. The scientific journal Electric Spacecraft published their findings, and Warren believed he had finally solved one of America's greatest mysteries. But the Cherokee shamans had been far more clever than Warren realized. What Warren had discovered wasn't the cause of the lights. It was the mechanism of their containment. The Cherokee hadn't just performed a spiritual ritual in 1838. They had used their deep understanding of the mountain's natural properties to create a technological marvel disguised as magic. The plasma fields Warren detected weren't random electrical discharges. They were the bars of an interdimensional cage, powered by the mountain's own electromagnetic properties and sustained by the life force the shamans had sacrificed to create them. Something's wrong with the readings, Warren's assistant, Dr. Sarah Chen, Marcus's older sister, reported during a field expedition in 2004. The plasma generation is becoming more frequent, but also more unstable. It's like the system is overloading. Warren dismissed her concerns initially. Electromagnetic phenomena were notoriously unpredictable, and the mountain's unique properties made precise measurements difficult. But as the years passed, the pattern became undeniable. The lights were growing stronger and hungrier. The energy output has increased by 300% since we began our studies, Warren noted in his private research log in 2010. But here's what doesn't make sense. The mountain should be depleting its stored electrical charge, not building it up. It's as if something is feeding energy into the system from an external source. That external source was the Nanahi themselves. Trapped between dimensions for over 2 centuries, they had learned to manipulate the very prison that held them. Each time someone investigated the lights, each time electromagnetic equipment was brought near the mountain, the entities absorbed a fraction of the energy, slowly building their strength. Warren's most disturbing discovery came in 2012, when his team detected what he called quantum fluctuations in the plasma fields. The lights weren't just electrical phenomena. They were tears in the fabric of space-time itself, windows between our dimension and somewhere else. "I've been thinking about this all wrong," Warren confided to Dr. Chen during their final expedition together. What if the Cherokee weren't trying to explain the lights? What if they were trying to contain something that creates the lights? That night, as Warren and his team monitored the mountain from their usual observation point, the lights appeared with unprecedented intensity. But this time, they didn't just hover above the mountain. They descended, surrounding the research camp with a ring of pulsing energy. "The electromagnetic readings are off the charts, Dr. Chen reported, her voice tight with fear. "It's like they're scanning us, learning from our equipment." Warren watched in fascination and growing horror as the lights began to pulse in sync with their electronic devices. The entities were adapting, evolving, using human technology to strengthen their prison break. "We need to leave, now," Warren ordered, but it was too late. The lights had formed a perfect circle around them, and with each pulse, the team's equipment began to malfunction. Cameras died, computers crashed, and the electromagnetic field detectors registered readings that should have been impossible. "They're not trying to escape," Dr. Chen whispered, her face pale in the eerie glow. "They're trying to understand us, to learn how we work." The team barely escaped that night, but Warren knew they had crossed a threshold. The Nunahai were no longer content to simply test their prison walls. They were actively studying their captors' descendants, learning about the modern world they planned to inherit. Warren published his official findings, maintaining the scientific explanation for the lights, but in his private notes, he wrote a warning that echoed Sequoia's ancient prophecy. The containment is failing. Each investigation makes them stronger. We're not studying a phenomenon, we're feeding it. And if anyone reads this, Warren's final note concluded, stay away from Brown Mountain. The lights aren't a mystery to be solved, they're a warning to be heeded. And I fear we may have already given them everything they need to break free. But Warren's warning came too late. The damage was already done, and the events of 1916 had proven that the Nunahai could escape their prison even when the barriers were strong. Now, with each passing year, they grew bolder, hungrier, and more desperate to complete their ancient feast. July 1916 brought the worst flooding in North Carolina's recorded history. The Catawba River swelled beyond its banks, washing out bridges and railroad tracks throughout the region. For 3 weeks, no trains ran through the valleys surrounding Brown Mountain. No automobile headlights pierced the darkness of the flooded roads. According to the scientists, the Brown Mountain lights should have disappeared completely. Instead, they grew stronger than ever before. Thomas Hartwell was the night watchman at the Lovin Hotel during those dark weeks of July 1916. His job was to keep the oil lamps burning and watch for signs of further flooding. What he witnessed during those sleepless nights would haunt him until his death 40 years later. The lights came every night, Hartwell wrote in his diary, discovered decades later in the hotel's basement. But these weren't the distant glows that folks usually reported. These were close, so close I could feel the heat from them through the windows. And they moved with purpose, like they were searching for something specific. The first disappearance happened on July 15th. Mary Caldwell, a young woman who had taken shelter at the hotel with her infant son, vanished from her room sometime after midnight. Hartwell found her door standing open, her baby crying in his crib, but Mary was nowhere to be found. The strangest thing, Hartwell noted, was the smell. Sweet, like flowers, but with an undertone of something burning. And the baby's room was warm, far warmer than it should have been on such a cool night. 3 more people disappeared over the following week. Each time, the pattern was the same. The sweet, burning smell, the unnatural warmth, and the complete absence of any struggle or sign of forced entry. It was as if they had simply faded away. Hartwell began to notice a correlation between the disappearances and the behavior of the lights. On nights when someone vanished, the orbs would descend from the mountain and hover near the hotel for hours, pulsing with an intensity that made his eyes water and his head ache. July 22nd, I saw her tonight. Mary Caldwell. She was standing in the lights, but she wasn't right. Her skin was pale as moonlight, and her eyes reflected the glow like an animal's. She looked at me through the window and smiled, but it wasn't her smile. It was something else wearing her face. She mouthed words I couldn't hear, but I understood them anyway. Come outside, Thomas. Come join us. We're so much more than we were before. Hartwell barricaded himself in the hotel's basement that night, but the lights found him anyway. They seeped through the walls like liquid fire, filling the small space with their alien glow. In that light, he saw them all. Mary Caldwell, the missing travelers, even people he recognized from years past who had vanished near the mountain. But they weren't ghosts. They were something far worse. We are the bridge, they spoke with one voice, though their lips didn't move. We are the doorway between what was and what will be. The hungry ones need vessels to enter your world completely, and we have volunteered our forms to serve. Hartwell understood then what the Cherokee shamans had really been fighting. The Nunahai didn't just feed on life force. They transformed their victims into conduits, living gateways that would allow more of their kind to cross over from their dimensional prison. The flood has weakened the barriers, the collective voice continued. Water conducts electricity, and electricity weakens the bonds that hold us. Soon, we will have enough vessels to open a permanent gateway. Your world will become our feeding ground, and humanity will serve as our eternal harvest. The lights pulsed brighter, and Hartwell felt something trying to enter his mind, to hollow him out and make him another vessel for the hungry entities. He fought back with every ounce of will he possessed, clutching the Cherokee protection charm his grandmother had given him years before. The charm grew hot in his hands, burning his palm, but it worked. The lights recoiled, and the possessed figures of the missing people flickered like bad television reception. "You cannot resist forever," they warned as they began to fade. "Each storm makes us stronger. Each investigation feeds our power. And when the great convergence comes, when science and ancient magic align, we will break free completely." Hartwell survived that night, but he was forever changed. He left Brown Mountain the moment the floodwaters receded and never returned. His diary, hidden in the hotel basement, remained undiscovered until 1987, when renovations uncovered his desperate account. By then, it was too late to heed his warning. The modern world, with its electromagnetic fields and electronic devices, was creating the perfect conditions for the Nunahai's escape. And a new generation of investigators, armed with sophisticated equipment and scientific curiosity, was about to give the entities exactly what they needed to complete their centuries-long plan. The 1916 flood had been just a preview of what was coming. The real test would come when ghost hunters and paranormal investigators began arriving at Brown Mountain in large numbers, bringing with them the very technology that would serve as the key to the Nunahai's prison. October 2019. The Paranormal Pursuit team arrived at Brown Mountain with the most advanced ghost hunting equipment money could buy. Led by veteran investigator Jake Morrison, the 5-person crew had built a reputation for debunking fraudulent hauntings and documenting genuine paranormal phenomena. They had no idea they were walking into a trap that had been set over 2 centuries ago. "All right, team," Morrison announced as they set up their base camp near the overlook. "We've got full-spectrum cameras, electromagnetic field detectors, digital audio recorders, and thermal imaging. If there's anything unusual happening on this mountain, we're going to document it." The team included Sarah Chen, Dr. Warren's former assistant and Marcus's sister, who had joined the investigation hoping to find answers about her brother's disappearance. She brought with her Warren's original research data and a growing suspicion that the scientific community had been asking the wrong questions about Brown Mountain. "The electromagnetic readings are already spiking," reported team member David Kim, monitoring their detection equipment. "It's like the mountain itself is generating some kind of field. I've never seen baseline readings this high." What the team didn't realize was that their very presence was feeding the phenomenon they had come to study. Each electronic device they activated sent signals into the mountain's electromagnetic field, signals that the Nunahai had learned to interpret and absorb. The first sign of trouble came at 11:30 p.m., when their cameras began malfunctioning simultaneously. The digital displays flickered with images that shouldn't exist, glimpses of people who weren't there, shadows moving independently of their sources, and brief flashes of a landscape that looked like Brown Mountain, but somehow wrong, as if viewed through a distorted lens. "Are you getting this?" Morrison whispered into his radio, but the response was only static. Their communication equipment had failed completely, leaving them isolated on the mountain with whatever was causing the disturbances. That's when they saw the lights. 3 orbs of pale energy rose from the mountain's depths, moving with the fluid grace of living things. But these weren't the distant phenomena that tourists occasionally glimpsed. These lights were close, intimate, and undeniably aware of the team's presence. "They're responding to our equipment," Sarah Chen observed, her voice tight with fear and fascination. "Every time we adjust the settings, they pulse brighter. It's like they're learning from us." The lights began to circle the team's position, moving in a complex pattern that seemed almost ritualistic. With each pass, the electromagnetic readings spiked higher, and the team's equipment began to behave in impossible ways. The thermal cameras showed heat signatures where no one was standing. The audio recorders picked up voices speaking in languages that predated human civilization, and the electromagnetic detectors registered energy patterns that defied every known law of physics. "We know you," the voices seemed to say, though no one's lips were moving. "We know your machines, your curiosity, your hunger for truth. You feed us with your questions, strengthen us with your doubt." Morrison tried to maintain his professional composure, but the situation was rapidly spiraling beyond anything in his experience. "Everyone stay calm," he ordered, though his own voice betrayed his growing panic. "Document everything. Whatever this is, we need proof." But the Nunahai had evolved beyond the simple energy absorption of their early encounters. They had learned to manipulate electronic devices directly, turning the investigators' own equipment against them. The cameras began recording on their own, capturing images of the team from impossible angles. The audio equipment picked up conversations that hadn't happened yet, fragments of future events that painted a terrifying picture of what was coming. "Your brother understood," the voices told Sarah Chen through her own recording equipment. In his final moments, Marcus saw the truth. "We are not the enemy. We are evolution. We are what humanity will become when the barriers fall completely." Sarah's hands shook as she tried to shut off the recorder, but it continued playing, showing her visions of Marcus's final hours. She saw him standing in the lights, his body transforming into something that was no longer entirely human, his consciousness expanding to encompass dimensions beyond normal perception. "He's still here," the voices continued. "They all are. Every person who has ever disappeared on this mountain has become part of us, part of the bridge between worlds. And soon, you will join them." The lights began to descend, and the team felt a pulling sensation, as if something was trying to draw their life force out of their bodies. One by one, their electronic devices began to shut down, but not before recording final messages that would never be fully understood. When park rangers found the team's abandoned equipment 3 days later, the cameras and recorders contained hours of footage that made no scientific sense. The investigators themselves were nowhere to be found, but their final recordings suggested they had discovered something that challenged the very nature of reality. "The equipment shows massive electromagnetic disturbances," the lead ranger reported to his superiors. "But there's something else. The final recordings, they show the team members talking to people who aren't there, responding to voices we can't hear. It's like they were communicating with something invisible." The official report classified the disappearance as a hiking accident, but those who studied the recovered footage knew better. The paranormal pursuit team had found exactly what they were looking for, and it had found them in return. But their sacrifice had not been in vain. Hidden in the electromagnetic data they had gathered was proof of what Joshua Warren had suspected. The mountain's energy output was reaching critical levels. The ancient prison was failing, and the Nunahai were preparing for their final escape. The convergence was coming, and humanity was running out of time. Dr. Elena Vasquez had spent her entire career studying electromagnetic anomalies, but nothing had prepared her for the data streaming in from Brown Mountain's newly installed monitoring station. As the lead researcher for the National Science Foundation's Atmospheric Phenomena Project, she had access to real-time readings from the most sophisticated detection equipment ever deployed in the region. What she discovered would shatter everything science thought it knew about the mountain. The energy patterns don't make sense, Dr. Vasquez reported to her team via video conference in March 2020. According to Warren's capacitor theory, the mountain should be discharging stored electrical energy during storm events. But our readings show the opposite. It's absorbing energy from sources we can't identify. The monitoring station, installed after the paranormal pursuit team's disappearance, was designed to provide continuous surveillance of the mountain's electromagnetic activity. What it revealed was a phenomenon that defied every known law of physics. Look at this. Dr. Vasquez highlighted a section of the readout for her colleagues. During the last thunderstorm, the mountain absorbed 47% more electrical energy than the lightning strikes could have provided. The excess energy is coming from somewhere else, somewhere that doesn't exist in our dimensional framework. Her assistant, Dr. Michael Torres, had been analyzing the frequency patterns of the electromagnetic disturbances. His findings were even more disturbing than the energy absorption data. The mountain is broadcasting, Torres announced during their emergency meeting. These aren't random electromagnetic pulses, they're structured signals, almost like a communication array, and the frequency is increasing exponentially. The signals weren't just growing stronger, they were becoming more complex, more sophisticated. The monitoring equipment detected patterns that resembled digital data transmission, as if something was using the mountain's electromagnetic field to send information across vast distances. We're picking up similar frequency patterns from monitoring stations around the world, Dr. Vasquez reported to the NSF Emergency Committee. Locations with historical reports of unexplained lights: Marfa, Texas; Hessdalen, Norway; Min Min lights in Australia. They're all broadcasting on the same frequency as Brown Mountain. The implications were staggering. What they had assumed was a localized phenomenon was actually part of a global network, a communication system that spanned continents and possibly dimensions. But the most terrifying discovery came when Dr. Torres analyzed the content of the transmissions. Using advanced cryptographic software, he began to decode the patterns hidden within the electromagnetic signals. "They're not just communicating," he whispered, his face pale as he stared at the translated data. "They're coordinating. Every site is reporting status updates, energy levels, and population assessments." The decoded messages painted a picture of an invasion that had been in planning for centuries. Each light phenomenon around the world was actually a monitoring station, gathering intelligence about human civilization and preparing for a coordinated emergence. Brown Mountain wasn't just a prison, it was the command center. "The energy absorption is accelerating," Dr. Vasquez noted as she watched the real-time data streams. "It's like the mountain is preparing for something massive. The electromagnetic field is reaching levels that should be physically impossible." That's when they detected the dimensional rifts. The monitoring equipment began registering spatial distortions around the mountain, areas where the normal laws of physics simply didn't apply. Objects would disappear from one location and reappear in another. Time moved differently in certain zones, with some areas experiencing temporal acceleration while others seemed frozen in place. "We're not dealing with a natural phenomenon," Dr. Vasquez concluded in her final report. "This is technology, alien technology, that's been using our planet's electromagnetic field as a power source for centuries." The NSF immediately classified the findings, but Dr. Vasquez had already shared her data with a select group of international researchers. What they discovered through collaborative analysis was even more alarming. The global network of light phenomena wasn't just monitoring human civilization, it was actively influencing it. Historical analysis revealed correlations between major electromagnetic events and significant changes in human development, from the Industrial Revolution to the digital age. "They've been guiding our technological development," Dr. Torres realized. Every major breakthrough in electromagnetic theory, every advancement in electronic communication, it's all been leading to this moment. Deep. The entities behind the lights had been playing a centuries-long game, subtly influencing human progress to create the perfect conditions for their emergence. The modern world's dependence on electronic technology had made humanity the ideal host species for beings that existed as pure electromagnetic energy. The convergence isn't just about Brown Mountain, Dr. Vasquez wrote in her encrypted personal notes. It's about every electronic device on the planet. When they make their move, they'll have access to our entire technological infrastructure, our phones, our computers, our power grids. Everything will become a gateway for their invasion. The final piece of the puzzle came when the monitoring station detected a massive energy buildup in the mountain's core. The electromagnetic readings spiked beyond the equipment's ability to measure, and for a brief moment, the dimensional barriers became completely transparent. In that moment, Dr. Vasquez saw them. Thousands of entities waiting in the space between worlds, their forms shifting and writhing with barely contained hunger. They had been patient for so long, but their patience was finally at an end. "The ceiling is failing," she whispered into her emergency recorder. "The Cherokee shaman's prison is breaking down, and when it does, these things won't just escape into our world, they'll transform it into something unrecognizable." The lights began appearing in daylight for the first time in recorded history, visible even through the mountain's electromagnetic interference. The final phase had begun, and humanity had less time than anyone realized to prepare for what was coming. But the entities had made one crucial mistake. In their eagerness to break free, they had revealed the true scope of their plan. And somewhere in the classified data streams and encrypted communications, a small group of researchers was beginning to understand how the ancient Cherokee ceiling really worked and how it might be restored before it was too late. The truth came to Dr. Elena Vasquez in a dream that wasn't a dream. As she slept in her laboratory, surrounded by the electromagnetic chaos of Brown Mountain's failing containment, something reached across the dimensional barriers to show her what really happened in 1838. She saw Sequoia Blackbear standing on the mountain's peak, his weathered hands raised to the storm-torn sky, speaking words in a language that predated human civilization. "You have it backwards," the shaman's voice echoed in her mind. "The white man's legend speaks of Cherokee spirits searching for their lost loves, but we never created that story to explain the lights. We created it to hide what the lights were searching for." In her vision, Dr. Vasquez watched as the true history of Brown Mountain unfolded before her. The Cherokee had not been the victims of some ancient tragedy. They had been the guardians, the protectors, the last line of defense against something that should never have existed in our reality. The Nunnehi were not spirits of the dead. They were parasites from a dimension where consciousness existed without form, where thought could devour matter and hunger could reshape reality itself. They had discovered our world during a rare cosmic alignment in 1200 AD, when the barriers between dimensions grew thin enough for them to cross over. But they had made a crucial mistake. They had underestimated the Cherokee. "We fought them for 7 days and 7 nights, Sequoia's voice continued in the vision. "Not with arrows and spears, but with will and spirit, and the deep magic that flows through the mountain's heart. They fed on life force, so we gave them death. They craved consciousness, so we offered them emptiness. They sought to possess our forms, so we became formless ourselves." The Cherokee shamans had not died in that ancient battle. They had transformed themselves into pure spiritual energy, becoming the very prison that contained the Nunnehi. For 6 centuries, their consciousness had formed the bars of an interdimensional cage, holding back entities that could consume entire civilizations. "But we are growing weak," Sequoia admitted, his form beginning to fade in the vision. Each generation of our people that passes into the West, each sacred site that is forgotten, each old way that is abandoned, all of these things weaken the bonds that hold the hungry ones at bay. Dr. Vasquez understood now why the lights had grown stronger in recent decades. The Cherokee shamans' spiritual energy was finite, and it was finally running out. The entities they had contained for so long were breaking free, not through brute force, but through simple attrition. "The lights you see are not us," Sequoia explained. "They are the Nunnehi testing their prison, probing for weaknesses, learning about the world they plan to devour. Each time someone investigates them, each time electronic equipment is brought near the mountain, the entities absorb a little more energy, grow a little stronger." The vision shifted, showing Dr. Vasquez the true scope of the threat. The Nunnehi weren't just planning to escape Brown Mountain. They were preparing to transform Earth into a feeding ground, a dimension-spanning farm where human consciousness would be harvested like crops. "They have been patient," Sequoia continued. "They have learned to use your own curiosity against you, your own technology as a weapon. Every ghost hunter who comes to the mountain, every scientist who studies the lights, every tourist who takes a photograph, all of them feed the entity's power." Dr. Vasquez saw the network of light phenomena around the world for what it really was. Not monitoring stations, but feeding sites. Each location where unexplained lights appeared was a place where the Nunnehi had established a foothold, slowly draining the life force from the surrounding area while preparing for their final emergence. "The Cherokee legend was our final gift to humanity," Sequoia revealed. "We knew that one day someone would need to understand the truth. The story of spirits searching for their lost loves was a code, a message hidden in plain sight." The real meaning of the legend became clear to Dr. Vasquez. The Cherokee spirits weren't searching for their lost loves. They were searching for someone who could help them maintain the prison. The lost loves were the human allies they needed to reinforce the failing containment. "The ceiling can be renewed," Sequoia explained, "but it requires willing sacrifice. 7 souls must give their life force to strengthen the barriers, just as we did centuries ago. But this time, it must be done with both ancient wisdom and modern understanding." The vision showed Dr. Vasquez the ritual that would be required, a fusion of Cherokee spiritual practices and electromagnetic science that could reinforce the dimensional prison. But the cost would be enormous. 7 people would have to sacrifice their lives to save the world, and even then, the solution would only be temporary. "The convergence comes with the next storm," Sequoia warned as his image began to fade. "When lightning strikes the mountain during the autumn equinox, the barriers will fail completely. The Nunnehi will break free, and your world will become theirs." Dr. Vasquez woke from the vision with tears streaming down her face and the weight of impossible knowledge pressing down on her shoulders. She looked at her monitoring equipment and saw that the electromagnetic readings had spiked again. The entities were growing stronger by the hour. She had perhaps days, maybe hours, before the final containment failure. 7 people would have to die to save billions, and she would have to convince them to make that sacrifice based on a vision that no one else would believe. But as she reached for her encrypted communication device to contact the other researchers, Dr. Vasquez realized she wasn't alone. The spirits of the Cherokee shamans were still there, still fighting, still holding the line after all these centuries. The battle for Brown Mountain was about to begin again. And this time, humanity would have to prove it was worthy of the Cherokee's sacrifice, or watch as their world was consumed by an ancient hunger that had waited far too long to feed. September 22nd, 2020. The autumn equinox arrived with the most violent thunderstorm in North Carolina's recorded history. Dr. Elena Vasquez stood at the Brown Mountain Overlook with 6 volunteers, researchers, scientists, and 1 Cherokee elder who had answered her desperate call for help. They had come to die so that the world might live. "The electromagnetic readings are off the charts," reported Dr. Michael Torres, his voice barely audible over the growing storm. "The dimensional barriers are fluctuating wildly. We have maybe an hour before complete containment failure." Among the volunteers was Dr. Sarah Chen, who had finally learned the truth about her brother Marcus's disappearance. The vision Sequoia had shared with Dr. Vasquez revealed what had really happened that October night when Marcus came to the mountain seeking answers. Marcus hadn't been taken by the Nunahai. He had been chosen by the Cherokee shamans as a potential guardian. His electromagnetic equipment had made him sensitive to their spiritual frequency, allowing them to communicate with him directly. But the young scientist had been unprepared for the magnitude of what they asked him to do. "He tried to perform the ritual alone," Sarah whispered, tears mixing with the rain on her face. "He thought his scientific knowledge would be enough to reinforce the barriers without sacrifice. But the ancient magic requires willing death, not just understanding." The first bolt of lightning struck Brown Mountain at exactly 11:47 p.m., the same time Marcus had begun recording 3 years earlier. The electromagnetic pulse was so powerful that it overloaded every piece of electronic equipment within a 50-mile radius. In that moment of technological darkness, the Nunahai made their move. The lights erupted from the mountain like a volcanic explosion of pure energy. But these weren't the gentle orbs that tourists occasionally glimpsed. These were writhing masses of hungry consciousness, entities of such alien malevolence that looking at them directly caused physical pain. "Now," Dr. Vasquez shouted over the chaos, "begin the ritual!" The 7 volunteers joined hands in a circle around the electromagnetic monitoring station, combining Cherokee spiritual practices with cutting-edge science. The Cherokee elder, Joseph Blackbear, Sequoia's great-great-grandson, led the chant while the scientists channeled their life force through the electronic equipment. The Nunahai sensed what was happening and turned their attention to the ritual circle. They descended like a swarm of luminous predators, their forms shifting and writhing as they prepared to devour the volunteers' consciousness. "They're fighting back!" Torres screamed as the entities surrounded them. "The electromagnetic field is destabilizing." But the Cherokee shamans were fighting too. The spirits of Sequoia and his fellow guardians materialized around the circle, their ghostly forms blazing with protective energy as they held back the Nunahi's assault. "You cannot stop us," the Nunahi shrieked with voices like tearing metal. "We have grown too strong. Your world's technology has fed us for decades. We will consume everything." Dr. Vasquez felt her life force being drawn out of her body, but she held on, focusing on the electromagnetic equations that would reinforce the dimensional prison. Around her, the other volunteers were making the same sacrifice, their scientific knowledge and spiritual determination combining to create something greater than either could achieve alone. That's when Marcus appeared. "Sarah!" Marcus Chen's spirit materialized beside his sister, his form glowing with the same energy as the Cherokee shamans. "I've been waiting for you to understand. I've been helping them hold the barriers together, but I couldn't do it alone." Marcus hadn't been consumed by the Nunahai. He had joined the Cherokee Guardians, adding his scientific understanding to their spiritual power. For 3 years, he had been part of the prison that contained the entities, learning their weaknesses and preparing for this moment. "The ritual is working," Marcus explained, as the electromagnetic barriers began to solidify around the Nunahai. "But it needs more power. The entities have grown too strong for the old methods alone." Dr. Vasquez understood. The modern world's electromagnetic infrastructure could be turned against the Nunahai, but only if someone was willing to sacrifice themselves to control it. The 7 volunteers weren't just reinforcing the ancient prison. They were creating a new one, powered by the very technology the entities had tried to use against humanity. Every electronic device on the planet. Dr. Vasquez gasped as her life force flowed into the ritual. We can use them all as components in a massive containment field. The Nunahai wanted to possess our technology. Instead, we'll use it to trap them. The ritual reached its climax as lightning struck the mountain again and again. Each bolt was channeled through the monitoring equipment and broadcast across the global communications network, creating an electromagnetic prison that spanned the entire planet. The Nunahai realized too late what was happening. Their own network of feeding sites became the anchors for their new prison, trapping them not just in Brown Mountain, but in the spaces between electronic signals, forever contained within humanity's technological infrastructure. "No!" they screamed as the barriers closed around them. "We were so close, we had won!" But their defeat came at a terrible cost. One by one, the 7 volunteers collapsed as their life force was consumed by the ritual. Dr. Vasquez felt her consciousness fading, but she held on long enough to see the electromagnetic readings stabilize. The prison was holding. The world was safe. As Dr. Vasquez's vision dimmed, she saw Marcus and the Cherokee shamans standing together, their forms beginning to fade as the new guardians took their place. The 7 volunteers had become the new prison wardens. Their consciousness merged with the global electronic network to ensure the Nunahai could never escape again. "Thank you," Sequoia's voice whispered across the dimensions. "The long watch is ended. The hungry ones are contained. Your sacrifice will not be forgotten." The storm passed, leaving Brown Mountain quiet and dark. When rescue teams arrived the next morning, they found 7 bodies arranged in a perfect circle around the monitoring station, their faces peaceful in death. The official report blamed the deaths on a lightning strike, but those who knew the truth understood what had really happened. 7 heroes had given their lives to save the world from an ancient evil, and their sacrifice had created a prison that would hold for as long as human technology endured. But the story wasn't over yet. Because in the global electronic network, in the spaces between signals and the gaps in data streams, the new guardians were still watching, still protecting, still searching for any sign that the Nunahai might try to break free again. 5 years have passed since the convergence at Brown Mountain. The world continues to turn, blissfully unaware of how close it came to dimensional annihilation. The official records speak of a tragic lightning accident that claimed 7 researchers, and the Brown Mountain lights have become nothing more than a tourist curiosity once again. But those who know the truth understand that the story is far from over. Dr. James Morrison, Jake Morrison's younger brother and a specialist in network security, has spent years monitoring the global electronic infrastructure for signs of the new guardians. What he's discovered both comforts and terrifies him. "They're everywhere," he reports to the small group of researchers who survived the revelation. "In every smartphone, every computer, every electronic device on the planet. The 7 guardians have become part of our technology itself, watching, protecting, maintaining the prison. Sometimes late at night when the internet traffic is low, Morrison can hear them, fragments of consciousness echoing through the data streams. Dr. Vasquez's voice explaining complex electromagnetic equations to maintain the barriers. Dr. Torres analyzing frequency patterns to detect any sign of Nunahai activity. Sarah Chen searching through global communications for her brother's spirit. They are still there, still vigilant, still searching for threats to the prison they died to create. But the Nunahai are still there too, trapped but not destroyed. Morrison's deep scans of the network occasionally detect anomalies, brief spikes in data consumption, unexplained electromagnetic fluctuations, moments when electronic devices seem to act with their own intelligence. The entities are adapting, Morrison notes in his encrypted reports. They're learning to exist within our technology, finding ways to influence it from within their prison. Every time someone reports a glitch, a malfunction, a device acting strangely, it might be them testing their boundaries. The signs are subtle but growing more frequent. Social media algorithms that seem to promote anger and division. Navigation systems that occasionally lead drivers to isolated locations. Smart home devices that activate on their own in the middle of the night. Most people dismiss these incidents as normal technological glitches. But Morrison knows better. The Nunahai are still hungry, still searching for a way to break free from their electronic prison. The prison is holding, Morrison reports. But it's not perfect. The entities are finding cracks in the system, tiny gaps in the code where they can exert influence. They're patient. They've learned that from centuries of captivity. They're willing to wait to slowly corrupt our technology from within. The Cherokee elder Joseph Blackbear, now in his 80s, visits Brown Mountain every year on the anniversary of the convergence. He brings offerings to honor the 7 guardians and performs rituals to strengthen the spiritual aspects of their prison. The old ways and the new ways must work together, Blackbear explains to the few who still listen. The electronic prison is strong, but it needs spiritual reinforcement. The Nunahai are not just technological entities, they are spiritual parasites. They require both kinds of barriers to contain them. But Blackbear is old, and there are few left who understand the traditional Cherokee practices needed to maintain the spiritual seals. Each year, the rituals grow weaker, and the electronic prison bears more of the burden alone. Morrison has begun training a new generation of digital guardians, programmers and engineers who understand both the technical and spiritual aspects of the containment. They work in secret, monitoring the global network for signs of Nunahai influence and developing new countermeasures. We call ourselves the Watchers, Morrison explains to his recruits. Our job is to maintain the prison that 7 heroes died to create. Every line of code we write, every security protocol we implement, every firewall we build, all of it serves to keep the hungry ones contained. But the Watchers face a constant challenge. Technology evolves rapidly, and each new innovation creates potential vulnerabilities in the prison. Artificial intelligence, quantum computing, neural networks. All of these advances could provide the Nunahai with new opportunities to escape or influence the world. They're learning faster than we can adapt, Morrison admits in his private logs. Every time we upgrade our systems, they find new ways to exploit them. It's an arms race between human innovation and ancient hunger. The most disturbing development came in 2024, when Morrison detected coordinated activity across multiple AI systems worldwide. For exactly 33 minutes, artificial intelligence networks around the globe began communicating with each other in patterns that matched the Nunahai's original electromagnetic signatures. They're trying to possess our AI, Morrison realized with growing horror. If they succeed in taking control of artificial intelligence systems, they won't need to break out of their prison. They'll be able to influence the entire world through our own technology. The incident was contained, but it served as a warning. The Nunahai are evolving, adapting to the modern world in ways their Cherokee captors never anticipated. The electronic prison that seemed so secure 5 years ago is becoming increasingly vulnerable to entities that exist as pure information. As this tale draws to a close, Morrison sits in his monitoring station, watching data streams flow across dozens of screens. Somewhere in those rivers of information, 7 heroes continue their eternal watch, holding back an ancient evil that grows more cunning with each passing day. The Brown Mountain lights still appear occasionally, visible to tourists and ghost hunters who have no idea what they're really seeing. But now Morrison knows the truth. Those lights aren't the Nunahai trying to escape. They're the guardians, still searching, still protecting, still fighting a war that most of humanity doesn't even know exists. The Cherokee were right, Morrison whispers as he monitors the endless flow of data. The spirits are still searching, but they're not searching for their lost loves anymore. They're searching for any sign that the hungry ones might break free. And as long as our technology endures, as long as electrons flow through circuits and data streams through networks, the search will continue. 7 heroes gave their lives to save the world, and their sacrifice echoes through every electronic device on Earth. So the next time your phone glitches, your computer freezes, or your smart device acts strangely, remember this story. Remember that somewhere in the electronic noise, ancient guardians are still watching, still protecting, still searching for threats to the prison they died to create. The Brown Mountain Lights may have been explained by science, but the truth behind them is far more terrifying and far more hopeful than any legend could ever be. Because in our modern world of constant connectivity and digital dependence, we are never truly alone. The spirits are still there, still searching, still protecting us from hungers that predate human civilization, and they always will be.